In our last episode, an alien ship crashed on Earth while humanity was in the midst of a global war. Or maybe the alien ship started the World War. Or did the alien ship end the global war? Who knows anymore? Honestly, who cares? Desperate to get their one ship back, the Zentradi send in a fleet of 1 million ships, and when that fails, a fleet of exactly 4.8 million ships. That's right, they're that bad at their jobs. Meanwhile, shallow starlet Lin Minmei sings the same song over and over. Technically, she's had a handful of songs, but then again, so did Tony Basil. Try mentioning Over My Head or Girls Night Out, and I bet nobody knows what you're talking about, but everyone's heard of Mickey. The one-hit wonder shames Rick Hunter into joining the military, but shows no interest in him romantically and blows him off. She instead enters into an abusive relationship with her own cousin, a sanctimonious, alcoholic, controlling pacifist who hates the military. Minmei hypocritically never shames her cousin into joining the military as she did with Rick, despite arrogant, nitpicking Robotech zealots trying to tell RetroBlasting how to run our channel. We continue with part 2 of our long-awaited Robotech retrospective.
This is not a toy.
With weekday syndication requirements on US television requiring 65 episodes, many Japanese animated series licensed for US broadcast ran into a bit of a challenge. Most Japanese animated series fall short of that magic 65 number. Beast King Go Lion has 52 episodes. Die Rugger has 52. Star Musketeer Bismarck has 51. Space Battleship Yamato has 26. Machine Robo has 47. Super Dimension Fortress Macross is no exception, 36 episodes. That presented a problem for Harmony Gold, but they crafted a solution by licensing 2 additional series as the second and third acts of the Robotech Saga. The middle chapter of the Robotech Saga, called The Masters, originates from the anime series Super Cavalry Southern Cross. Macross and Southern Cross are the first and third installments in a trilogy of 3 unrelated anime series dubbed the Super Dimension Trilogy. The middle sibling, Super Dimension Century Orgus, was not utilized by the Robotech producers. Were it not for Harmony Gold adapting Southern Cross for Robotech, it's likely we wouldn't be talking about it today. The series tapped out in Japan after only 23 episodes. It's fair to say that Harmony Gold saved this show from terminal obscurity. In the far-flung future, humans have colonized worlds beyond our solar system. At the frontier of space, the terraformed world named Glory is home to a small community of humans with their own government and technologically advanced army. Unfortunately, an alien race called the Zoar come home to Glory after a very long absence and don't like the new human squatters. Desperate to reach the source of their energy, a flower called the Protozoar, which only grows on Glory, they attempt to annihilate the colonists. A rebellious army officer, Jean, and a human once enslaved by the Zoar, Saifri, lead the charge to turn the tide of the battle. The lyrics of the original Japanese intro focus on déjà vu. Which is more than appropriate when compared to Macross. In both stories, you have humanity in possession of alien property. The aliens arrive to reclaim it and attempt to destroy humanity in the process. The aliens are a repressed, emotionless society that do not understand human culture. And ultimately, it takes a girl with green hair to rebel against her own people and help bring down the alien threat. However, unlike Macross, Southern Cross was not popular in Japan, and it was forced to wrap up quickly, being truncated to only 23 episodes. The writers at Harmony Gold decided this was the series that would continue the Robotech story, and so the adaptation began. If you're a purist for Japanese anime, you're probably aghast at the Robotech adaptation. But Southern Cross isn't exactly iconic on its own. Robotech's adaptation makes the series somewhat more relevant by way of being tied to the Robotech continuity, whereas the Japanese original is merely derivative. Harmony Gold's writers made some moves to make the story fit. The planet Glory is now Earth, and the characters are the next generation, the children of the survivors of the war with the Zentradi. John is now Dana Sterling, the daughter of Max and Miria Sterling. How a blue-haired man and a green-haired woman produced a blonde-haired child is a mind game that we're going to move right on past. The original characters from the Macross saga have all left the planet in a new intergalactic ship, the SDF-3, to search for the Robotech Masters. But the Robotech Masters have also left their homeworld, heading for Earth to learn what happened to their Zentradi army.
I guess they took different routes through space, so they missed each other.
It's a bit throwing to consider that Max and Miria just left their 17-year-old daughter behind on Earth, possibly for the rest of her life. They could have easily brought her with them on the SDF-3, given how families were definitely on the SDF-1. Macross was the proto-Enterprise D from Star Trek The Next Generation, in which the military and their families were on board the same vessel. Why they had to make Dana related to characters from Macross smells like what it is: a desperate attempt to make this series appealing to people who liked the previous Superior series. Do whatever you can to make this one related, even if it doesn't make sense at all upon inspection. The writers took this to such an extent that much of the opening episode of The Masters is a clip show with Dana relating the tale of how Max and Miria met.
Boy, that's it.
Huh?
I'll tell you a story. This'll cheer you up. How my mother met my father. Daddy was a Veritech pilot with the SDF-1.
Hey, remember that show you liked? This one is related. Please keep watching.
Coincidentally, there's a guy in a minor part on the show who looks just like Max, but wasn't written to be Max, likely because his role wasn't big enough and he doesn't really interact with Dana. Or maybe he never interacts with Dana because she's annoying and completely unlikable.
Sergeant Sterling of Tactical Armored Squad 15. We've been on a practice drill in G Sector. It was a hard ride and a lot of dusty road. You wouldn't happen to have anything to drink around here, would you? I don't believe it.
From minute one in the original Japanese version, she's an insubordinate flake who always gets thrown in the stockade. Immediately after she gets out of the stockade, promising to never be a problem again, she goes on an unauthorized training ride with her squad, starts a bar fight with other military personnel, and wrecks military equipment. Inexplicably, she opts to go AWOL after that before she's found by the MPs and almost taken back to the stockade again. But they let her go thanks to a conveniently timed red alert.
Why is she still in the military?
Robotech desperately tries to downplay this part of her character with serious re-edits by making the first episode the aforementioned flashback clip show and editing the second episode so she's only thrown in the brig the one time for the joyride. Not long afterward, she's freed and given back command of the squad.
Fall in!
Oh, they can't be serious about this. I thought you were in for 30 days.
It's beyond contrived, especially given Dana's complete lack of appeal. There is nothing here to appreciate. Shallow, manipulative, and arrogant sums her up pretty nicely. I'm starting to understand why her parents gladly abandoned her on Earth.
You have 3 human female characters designed for this series, and yet they chose the worst one to put front and center. Her out-of-control personality is rivaled only by her out-of-control hairstyle. She's also got this thing always sticking out of her hair. They never explain what it is. The MP, Nova, has something similar, which is more obviously a piece of tech, but the pilot Marie doesn't have anything like that in her hair. We searched for an answer as to what that thing is in Dana's hair. A comlink? A futuristic hair pick? We looked into it, and you know what we found?
We ain't found shit.
To be clear, Dana isn't a Robotech problem. She's a deficiency here in Southern Cross as well.
Like the Robotech adaptation of Macross, the Robotech producers port over much of Southern Cross's plot into their adaptation. For example, a major dynamic in Southern Cross is the inherent conflict between the human soldiers and their leadership's terrible decision-making. The leaders of Glory prove to be inept buffoons, more fixated on saving face than making rational decisions.
But tell me what will be gained by sending our pilots to almost certain destruction? I will not stand for this. You are in no position, sir, to question the abilities of our fighting forces. Very well, Commander. Prepare to attack.
The leader of the Southern Cross Army in Robotech, charged with protecting the Earth, suffers from the same poor leadership skills. In Southern Cross, attempts to call for help from the neighboring Liberté system result in only a couple of ships easily crippled by the Zoar. Liberté then abandons Glory to its fate. So despite the alien invasion of an ally, there's no interest in a collective defense. It seems these systems aren't so much united, they're more like Greek city-states.
Meanwhile, in Robotech, the invading Zoar are recouched as the Robotech Masters, and those flowers are no longer the Protozoar, but that pesky protoculture energy the Zentradi were after in the Macross Saga.
The planet of Liberté is now a mere space station, and when they call for help, the spaceship that arrives and gets trounced by the Robotech Masters is actually a ship dispatched from the SDF-3, the ship that went looking for the Robotech Masters.
There's no more reinforcements coming from the SDF-3? Sorry, Major, but we were hoping for more substantial assistance than that. You must be kidding!
I'm sorry, sir, but what it boils down to is that you cannot expect any further help from the Pioneer expedition at this time.
Huh?
So let's make sure this is perfectly clear. The Macross crew have left Earth in the SDF-3 to find the Robotech Masters, and they get a distress call from Earth that the Robotech Masters are attacking their home planet. They literally passed each other in space, so they send a single intercept vessel to fight off the Robotech Masters, and when that doesn't work, they say, "We can't send any more assistance, and we're not turning around." Their intended objective is literally behind them, attacking their home planet, and they're not doing anything about it.
This is thin, Riggs. This is very thin.
This is anorexic.
This is the problem with trying to connect two unrelated series. You constantly write yourself into corners, and the only way out is to ignore logic entirely.
Changing the Zoar to the Robotech Masters has a rippling effect that raises a lot of questions. The Robotech Masters allegedly have come to Earth because their Zentradi warriors failed in the previous series to secure the SDF-1's protoculture factory. The leaders of the invading force are confused as to why the humans are attacking them. All they want is the protoculture matrix from the wreckage of the SDF-1.
How could the situation have come to this point? It was never our intention to destroy the Micronians or harm their planet.
Maybe because you didn't show up with a white flag and explain your intentions? Instead, you left it open to interpretation, and since you've already destroyed their planet once, are you really surprised that humans are shooting first and asking questions never?
The Robotech Masters go on to explain amongst themselves and not to the humans that the protoculture will attract their sworn enemies, the Invid.
The true threat to both our races is the parasitic Invid, who will come in search of the protoculture themselves. We must complete our mission before the Invid arrive.
Again, why are you not telling the humans this? Robotech mythology claims that the Zentradi were just the shock troops of the Robotech Masters. But even then, wouldn't they have made some mention of the dangers of the Invid after befriending the humans in Macross? One of the more clever alterations between Southern Cross and Robotech is the way the writers take the Mesa caves of the Protozoar flowers and change them to be the ruins of the SDF-1, where inside they find the remains of the protoculture factory and the flowers that produce the energy source.
But admittedly, it's a big reach. It's only been 15 years since the events of the Macross Saga, and already the ruins of the SDF-1 have turned into forested mesas with deep caves and no trace of fabricated metal left. And don't tell me it's because of the protoculture flowers.
The ruined city around the Macross is nowhere to be seen. And why does the ship's interior remain a mystery to the locals when the SDF-1 was central to humanity after the Zentradi War?
Plus, why didn't they transfer the protoculture matrix over to the SDF-3 before they went in search of the Robotech Masters? That seems like a big oversight on the part of these Starship engineers.
And there's a lot of confusion on Robotech message boards about whether the humans on the SDF-1 knew of the protoculture matrix at all. They knew about protoculture from their experiences with the Zentradi, but the Zentradi and the humans never once coordinated to adequately search the SDF-1. Only minor bits of the adaptation of Southern Cross fit perfectly into Macross, namely the planet Glory being a desolate rock. It looks all but identical to the condition of Earth at the end of Macross, so visually the setting is seamless. Another advantage of the Robotech adaptation is the blunting of the strange Napoleonic motif the original Japanese show used as inspiration. Southern Cross is filled with names and designs inspired in large part by imperialist France. It really comes out of left field, especially in offices and buildings where you suddenly feel like you're watching Scaramouche.
Mr. President, the deputy from Soissons will be absent from this assembly permanently.
Character dynamics are all over the place. Some of it is the fault of the English dubbing, such as the scene during the bar fight where Dana is desperately trying to stop the shenanigans. In the Japanese original, Jeon is enthusiastically cheering on the violence, but her facial expressions could not be changed for Robotech, so the English version feels off. Other character dynamics foibles are the fault of the writing. When Bowie meets Musica in the enemy ship, she's initially scared of him, and he tries to assure her he's not going to hurt her. When the security forces race in to confront Bowie, who's an enemy combatant and an invader on their vessel, he guns them down, understandably freaking Musica out beyond belief. She tries to flee, but he prevents her from leaving by grabbing her and telling her those evil guards won't be able to hurt her anymore. Bowie is deluded into believing he was doing her a favor.
Don't tell me you're still afraid of me. I saved you from those two, didn't I? Doesn't that prove I'm your friend?
Dude, those guards were her people. You're acting like a serial killer.
Musica, like the rest of the Robotech Masters, is part of a symbiotic trio of clones. All of the Masters travel around in these living 3-packs. Musica has 2 identical sisters, and they play these instruments to keep the rest of the trios of Masters working in harmony or something. Her sisters are named Octavia and Allegra. Yes, that's right, Allegra.
Stop suffering, start living. Available at Walmart.
To me, the most illogical part of the story in either version is the carte blanche given to Seyfried, named Zoar Prime in Robotech. In Southern Cross, Seyfried was a brainwashed human pilot captured by the Zoar and made to fight for them. The Robotech writers had a field day and rewrote him as Zoar Prime, a clone of Zoar, the inventor of protoculture and robotechnology, and the guy who stole away with the protoculture matrix in the SDF-1 and crashed on Earth.
Talk about a nobody becoming a somebody.
Why can't I get him out of my head?
Dana hatches an insane scheme and orders her squad to infiltrate the military hospital so she can assassinate Zoar Prime, but learns he's lost his memory. Nova catches her red-handed as she jumps out the hospital window to escape. The next day, instead of arresting her, they give her complete autonomy to help Zoar Prime regain his memory since she's half Zentradi. Dana then gives him complete freedom to roam around military installations. This makes some sense in Southern Cross because Seyfried was a human pilot from their army that had been kidnapped and brainwashed, and they're trying to rehabilitate him. But Zoar Prime is most definitely an alien combatant from an enemy army.
I gave him clearance to go wherever he wants. I thought it might help him get his memory back. You never can tell. What do you think he is, the spy?
Thinking he couldn't possibly be a spy is stupid.
Why is she still in the military?
Yes, it's similar to how cavalier they were in Macross, just letting Miria have a Veritech fighter. Talk about benefit of the doubt. And it comes back to bite them in the butt this time. Late in the series, Zoar tweaks out and betrays the heroes as they infiltrate the interior of the enemy ship, because he's been used as a spy camera by the Robotech Masters the entire time. That's right, they've been privy to every plan hatched against them because Dana's got a crush on Zoar and doesn't hesitate to tell him every classified thing going on. It's truly insane. Even when Zoar reemerges moments later in an enemy bioroid mecha with weapons drawn, Dana thinks her best chance is to get out of her tank and run toward him. He's just betrayed them, threatened them, and is aiming weapons at them. So she gets out of the one thing that is meant to protect her?
Why is she still in the military?
They escape and sneak around in robes, but conveniently, the Masters never question that Dana and her two compatriots don't actually look like each other. All of the Masters trios are identical triplets, but despite Dana and her friends looking nothing like one another, the Masters just take it at face value that they're a trio of clones. It makes no sense. One of the Masters clones tries to distract his own people to help Dana escape, but Dana wastes his sacrifice by running back after he's shot. He allowed himself to be killed for her escape, so she blows the escape. Wait a minute, why does that rifle look like Sark's ship from Tron? Despite Zoar proving a spy and betraying them, Dana insists on rescuing him and bringing him back to their military base. At the same time, Bowie brings Musica back with them as well because he's crushing on her. Dana and crew sneak her onto the military base while Zoar has the mendacity to imply Musica can't be trusted.
Dude, you've been under mind control and had almost the entire squad killed, but you're gonna point fingers at the harp player?
And yeah, Zoar is just let back onto the military base without any repercussions that he was an enemy spy previously and sabotaged their entire mission, getting people killed.
This entire chain of command deserves to die for the lack of common sense they're exhibiting. Plus, why is Dana still in the military?
All of this chaos stems from Dana's sophomoric infatuation with Zoar, and she claims she was with Nova when they initially pulled Zoar from the wreckage of his bioroid.
I was there when Nova pulled you out of the bioroid.
There's only one problem. The flashback clearly shows that Dana isn't there, so she's annoying and delusional. In Southern Cross, it's a little more difficult to determine who Seyfried has the hots for. Yes, Jean is aggressively trying to get his attention, but there seems to be something between Seyfried and Lana at one point as well. Not that it matters. The boyfriend rivalry is about as thin as the plotting. Oh look, Dana wants a dress. Oh look, the other girls want the dress. What a conflict! There's an entire episode devoted to Dana trying to help this rando with his crush on Nova and get her to notice the poor troglodyte. Why are we spending time on this? It's a tough sell to tell me this story has stakes, but instead show me arguments over dresses, over men, and whether or not Bowie is allowed to play the piano at the club.
Hey, why don't you go play piano at the coffee house right now? Go!
Huh?
I get that Macross had similar elements of daily life, but the stakes were written in a superior way, and when the call came to scramble the fighters, you felt the urgency and dread far more palpably. The only time I felt this show had me moving towards the edge of my seat was during an early episode when they realized they must fight their way through the orbiting Zoar to get far enough away from the planet to send a Mayday signal to their allies on Liberté, or to the SDF-3, depending on which version you're watching. This was an exciting development, but didn't go anywhere interesting in the end. Similarly, the bad guys don't go anywhere interesting themselves. The villains don't really develop. Yes, the green-haired girl named Musica has a crisis of conscience and wants to find her humanity, but the rest of the Zoar, these trios of emotionless symbiotes on lithium, remain combative jerks all the way up to the end.
The Robotech Masters want their protoculture. That's it. Aside from being trios, these villains are as one-dimensional as they come.
The peripheral characters aren't memorable either. Where in Macross you get to know Roy and Claudia and Max and Ben Dixon and the Bridge Bunnies and Gloval, here in Southern Cross there's nothing that makes these characters jump out. Aside from Dana, you'll remember Zoar Prime, and you might remember Bowie, maybe Nova, and possibly Musica, but only because they all have crazy hair colors. There's nothing substantive about any of these animated ciphers. One area where I struggle to decide if Robotech is better than Southern Cross is the soundtrack. The question is this: is a shameless ripoff of 80s pop songs better than the Robotech score?
The music in Southern Cross is very tracked and very repetitive and sounds very familiar.
You're watching anime sci-fi and suddenly listening to George Michael? And Big Country?
The music of Southern Cross is definitely unoriginal, and that seems to be the overriding problem with the entire series. Everything feels uninspired and by the numbers. And that intangible is something that Robotech's narrative overlay can't surmount.
The Spartan tanks just aren't as interesting or well designed as the Valkyrie fighters from Macross. Tanks with pilots exposed on top in battle that leap around like big bullfrogs? Not as cool as I'm sure they'd hoped. The robot modes are also rather generic and humdrum. Transforming fighters do make brief appearances, but they look clunky and childish. If the Veritech is Lego, this thing is the Duplo version. The enemy Bioroid armor on the flying sleds evokes Flash Gordon, but ultimately fails to be memorable. Later, we're treated to transforming space helicopters, but in this case, their application makes even less sense than the F-14s in space from Macross. Japanese audiences didn't warm to this series either, and the producers had to rush out an ending to cancel the series early. For Southern Cross, the series ends with Seyfried sacrificing himself to save the planet of glory and destroy the Zoar invaders, but in doing so, spreads the protozoar flowers all over the planet. In Robotech, Zoar Prime does much the same thing, except because Harmony Gold had a third series to tack on, they changed the story to say that the protoculture flowers were originally the food source of an alien race known as the Invid, and now that the flowers had been blown across the Earth, the Invid would sense this and invade as soon as possible. It's widely agreed that the Masters is the weakest of the 3 chapters of Robotech's original run, and I support that position, if for no other reason than the Robotech producers were already operating under a disadvantage. They were handed a failed show to reconfigure into something that would be a follow-up to Macross, one of the greatest anime series of all time.
They were basically told to dig a hole in dry sand. Fortunately, the writers wouldn't be in the same scenario with Robotech: The New Generation.